Should the Detroit Lions target the newest free agent that's available? Let's check in. I'm interested. I'm John Macaroon, Detroit Lions on SI. Thanks everyone for checking in on our YouTube channel, the Detroit Lions on SI website. Lots of interesting news and nuggets, daily, daily videos, analysis, everything going on with the Detroit Lions. We'll be out there for Detroit Lions rookie minicamp on Friday, so make sure you check in. But it's interesting that with each passing day, it always seems like there's a new outside linebacker or defensive end for the Detroit Lions to potentially target. And you guys are still strongly invested in that position, which I think is great. When you look at the Detroit Lions football team, there's avenues to really be positive about a lot of spots that the Detroit Lions seem to be shored up in. Safety, linebacker looks solid. Offensive line now looks revamped with the draft picks, running backs, everybody. Barry Sanders came out and was talking how he still continues to feel like Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are the best tandem in the National Football League. You're set at quarterback. You just look at this football team, and that's why there's been such a heavy emphasis on the defensive end spot and outside linebacker is I think most people believe that if the Detroit Lions with Aiden Hutchinson are able to pressure the quarterback, then the team can achieve a lot more success rushing the quarterback, rushing and actually sacking the quarterback, not just being able to pressure, but being able to get home, finishing. And that's where we'll talk about it. Jadeveon Clowney had 5.5 sacks last year. Probably it makes it difficult to logically think that the Lions are going to add a veteran that's 32 years old and pay him north of $10 million a year, which probably he could get on the open market. But in my opinion, I think that if Brad Holmes is realistic about having strong competition, I don't mind adding Jadeveon Clowney to this mix, an outside linebacker that can get to the quarterback. I do think that, yeah, there are question marks regarding his culture fit and, his motor at this particular time at his age. But, and you do sense that the Detroit Lions are a lot more familiar with Za'Darius Smith and what he can bring to the table. But I'm of the opinion, bring them all. Bring Jadeveon Clowney. Bring Za'Darius Smith. I would love to see veterans be able to work at camp with the young Ahmed Hassanian. What's wrong with Jadeveon Clowney, Za'Darius Smith, Marcus Davenport, all competing for opportunities to get playing time? And you battle it out. I think that right now, the fans are clamoring on a daily basis in the mentions and the comments. I see them that the Detroit Lions want Za'Darius Smith. Fans of the Lions are clamoring for the veteran. They saw what he was about. They see that he gravitated quickly by wearing the Detroit gear, gravitating toward the Pistons and Rasheed Wallace and that whole Detroit bad boy mentality. They see a player that understands what it's like to come into a city and then quickly gain the respect of the fans. And we've seen him now at the Pistons game, seen him at Little Caesars Arena recently. So I can understand when you ask the question, should the Lions sign a free agent in Jadeveon Clowney, who last spent time with the Carolina Panthers? People are still like, nah, not really comfortable based on what they know about Za'Darius Smith. But when you look at it as a whole, it does still feel like the Detroit Lions have the need still opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. And I do think Marcus Davenport is in play to have a good season. But can you find better? Can you find a better football player at this stage? I don't think it's going to be in the likes of Jadeveon Clowney or Za'Darius Smith, but I do think that depth is also key. I think Davenport right now has earned the opportunity based on the work that he's done with Dan Campbell in the past and what he's brought to the locker room. Even though he had an injury-plagued season, I think that right now we have to accept that Marcus Davenport is number one on the depth chart. But that doesn't mean you can't have great depth behind. And who's to say that a competition with Jadeveon Clowney, Za'Darius Smith, and the young rookie couldn't produce a lot of growth across the board? And that's why I see, to me, when people ask what's going to happen opposite of Aiden, I do think that clearly going into training camp, it's going to be Marcus Davenport. But there's going to be a signing, I believe. I believe the Lions are going to go out and target another outside linebacker or defensive end. And most likely the odds-on favorite and an NFL columnist, a senior columnist, now you're starting to see the best fits kind of start to be put together where the remaining free agents are starting to be looked at as to where they could potentially be the best fit. And clearly across the board, multiple NFL columnists are going to target Za'Darius Smith being a perfect fit for the Detroit Lions. So I'm excited. I'm excited about the potential that, okay, there's still maybe another signing that could happen to bolster the defensive line unit. And clearly, I do think that the leader in the clubhouse externally is Za'Darius Smith, but Jadeveon Clowney presents an interesting, mindset. Gritty. I do think that he is a player that understands the National Football League, understands the mission, and maybe would be rejuvenated by playing in the Detroit Lions scheme. And so you got to look at it and you say, okay, is the Lions locker room right now strong enough to withstand somebody that maybe is not exactly the perfect A++ fit? I do. I think when you got the veteran leadership across the board with Alex Anzalone and Derek Barnes, and now the growing Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch, I do think that locker room is conducive and tight enough to be able to handle somebody with talent and that just wants to come in and and earn a spot, especially somebody that's familiar with the division, has experience, can be somebody that can provide veteran leadership if he's the next signing to Ahmad Hassanian. I think that Marcus Davenport clearly is a player that I do think will gravitate well toward his teammates, and the more help you can get to your young players, the better off the football team will be. So it's intriguing. It's an intriguing discussion, and I understand the other side. I understand those that say it's just not likely, it's not cap friendly, it probably is going to be costly, and if the Lions weren't willing to pay Za'Darius Smith, how are they going to pay Jadeveon Clowney? Those that have worked closely with him say, you kind of want to avoid him. He may be a guy that ends up being a player that you may regret signing. But when you have a football team like the Detroit Lions, led by Dan Campbell, I just don't see players coming in and lasting too long if they don't end up buying in. Like, I think opportunity should be given to those that, have shown that they've been able to do a job that the Lions need. And I think the Detroit Lions would benefit from having Jadeveon Clowney, at least at camp, at least at training camp, bringing a new energy, a new vibe to the football team. And like I said, at this point, at this stage of the offseason, I'm not seeing too many drawbacks other than clearly the contract. If he's going to demand over north of $10 million, that's going to be an issue. If the price comes down, and of course, all these talks are usually typically predicated, but we always got to say it, typically predicated on the contract. What does he want? If he wants north of $10 million, he wants to break the bank. If he wants that one last payday, then clearly the discussion won't go too far. But if you just look at talent alone, what he can bring to the football team at outside linebacker, I think he could do the job. I think you could line him up in certain situations, clearly, in pass rushing downs, while Ahmed Hassanian continues to develop, because you kind of figure that his early role is going to be a little bit more of an uphill climb as he works to learn more moves, add to his skill set, understand exactly the depth of what you need to do to set edges and stop the run and the pass, to be able to recognize each and every assignment in different calls and sets and coverage schemes and decisions that are made by Kelvin Shepard. So you figure that's going to take a little bit longer than just quickly one training camp and then start producing. So the more veterans, the better. And I think that a veteran makes sense. And currently it's Marcus Davenport. But again, you always have to put the caveat that we're not certain that Davenport can last all 18 NFL games and the postseason. So that's why the concern is high. That's why the anxiety level is still elevated regarding that position. And I think it still should be. It still should be talked about, still should be explored. But in looking at the availability of Jadeveon Clowney, I don't see too many cons other than the contract that he is seeking. And if it goes south, just like it did with Cam Sutton or others that have not been able to withstand the pressures or do not execute at the same level that is called upon by the Detroit Lions, I don't see drawbacks, because the Lions can quickly move forward. And that's where these contracts can be heavily emphasized with incentives, giving the player some added motivation to get out there and perform at a high level. And so if the opportunity, look, you don't want Clowney returning to the division. So I look at it and I say, I don't see where the cons, there are cons, but I don't see where the cons outweigh the pros. In an even situation, if you have 3-3, do you take the chance? In my humble opinion, if you ask me what they're going to do versus what I want them to do, I do not think that signing will take place. I think the leader in the clubhouse externally at this point in time to come back is Za'Darius Smith. But it's interesting question, one to be debated. Let us know what you think. Leave some messages in the comments. Thanks everybody for subscribing and actively engaging in the YouTube channel. And thanks those that have encouraged us to do more videos, even more. We were doing a lot before, but now we're doing even more. And so when you got time to fire up the camera and the microphones, why not? Thanks, everybody. Check in. Detroit Lions on SI.